Hey friends, it's Trailblazer. So I'm doing another kind of different thing today. A thing that I have been thinking is that it would be really great to have some kind of constructive interchange of ideas between BattleTech YouTubers. So today I wanted to talk a bit about some ideas that come out of Death from Above Wargaming's YouTube channel that I think are really interesting and deserve to kind of be thought more deeply about. Now, what I have to say is going to take the form of some constructive criticism for them. So I just want to say at the outset that I think that these folks are just some of my favorite content creators on YouTube, and they're really doing things with amazing production values that I could never aspire to, and some stuff that has incredible interest for me. And in fact, the series that I'm going to be talking about, their Battlytics Series, is one that I follow religiously. I've seen most of the videos. So I hope that they and other people will take this in the spirit that's intended, which is as, the sincerest form of flattery, right? Which to my mind is to kind of take someone's ideas and riff off of them and yes, raise some concerns about them. So, definitely head over to their channel and take a look at their videos and, form your own judgment and just in general support these guys because I myself am a big fan. So with all that said, I wanted to take a look at their Battlytics series of views, which kind of takes well-known mechs and generates a bunch of interesting metrics that are supposed to provide a good kind of guide to how powerful the mech is, how efficient it is in terms of bang for your battle value, and especially, what kinds of offensive and defensive virtues and vices does the mech have. Now, as a whole, I think that their metrics are really representative overall of a mech's combat capability, at least in a stand-up fight, especially for frontline kind of battle line brawler mechs. So for those kinds of mechs, I really trust what they have to say, and I feel much more secure taking a mech like that into battle if they have scored it highly. But I just had a couple of criticisms, and the first one that I wanted to start with has to do with their offensive index for what they call lethality, which is how good of a job does the mech do destroying a javelin and how quickly. Now, a javelin in particular is kind of an unusual choice to use, to treat the metric of how quickly can you destroy a javelin as representative of a mech's overall lethality, because a javelin has a feature that is really suboptimal and that most mechs don't have, which is that the head has below maximum armor. And in particular, the armor on the head of a javelin is low enough that a 10-point hit can destroy the head. Now, this makes a huge difference because if you have a mech that fires damage in 10-point clusters like PPCs or an autocannon 10, that mech is going to one-shot a javelin much more often than it would one-shot 95% of the mechs that actually see play in BattleTech. I mean, to me, I almost never want to use a mech that has less than 9 armor on the head. There's a couple of exceptions, especially the Phoenix Hawk, but really, this is a highly suboptimal feature of the Javelin, and I just think it would be a more accurate measure of a mech's lethality if you chose a mech that had a full 9 armor on the head that wouldn't go down to a headshot from a 10-point weapon. Now, the second point I wanted to make is less of a kind of specific criticism of a particular part of their methodology, but just a kind of general observation, which is they're looking at metrics that have to do with how does a mech kind of, what kind of damage can it output, what kind of damage can it take. They factor in, of course, what kind of movement modifiers are you putting up against enemy fire. But a thing that they don't factor in is positioning. So mechs that are fast, of course, they have one advantage that the Battlytics videos do take into account, which is how much of a target movement modifier do they throw out there to get in the way of the enemy hitting you. But there's another factor that is more intangible and that is just never going to show up in these kinds of numerical measures, which is how effectively does the mech get out of the way of the enemy, get out of line of sight of the enemy, or get into really advantageous positions, like behind the enemy shooting into the rear torso. So if you take a fast jumper like a Phoenix Hawk or a Wraith, something like that, and a Spider perhaps, and you consider what kind of rating is it given on Battlytics, we can expect, I think, that the rating is just going to be in many ways a vast underestimate of the kind of real-life combat power of the mech, because it doesn't include the mech's ability to get itself into a position that puts it at an advantage in a game. So here's how I would recommend, I think, using these ratings. If you have two mechs that have a similar battlefield role, like if you take two battle line brawlers, or if you take two, fast jumping flankers, and you compare them to each other, like suppose that you find that a Wraith has a higher efficiency rating than a Venom or a Spider or something like that, then I think you should be really confident on the basis of their metrics that the Wraith is a better pick than the Spider or the Venom. But if you take two mechs that have very different roles and you compare their scores on the Battlytic metrics, then I don't think you can say very much. For example, I don't think you can conclude very much about whether a Phoenix Hawk is better or more efficient than a Warhammer or a Thunderbolt on the basis of these metrics, because what you're just looking for in a Phoenix Hawk is so different from what you're looking for in a Thunderbolt that, a comparison between the resiliency of the Thunderbolt and the resiliency of the Phoenix Hawk is just comparing apples and oranges. So these are just a couple pieces of, again, what I consider to be constructive criticism of a way of looking at BattleTech mechs that I think is overall really illuminating and can be very helpful and informative if you take it in the right way and you don't kind of extrapolate it beyond the types of comparisons that you can reasonably make on the basis of these numbers. And again, if this is the first you've heard of Battlytics or Death from Above Wargaming and you are a BattleTech fan, strongly encourage you to get over to their channel and check it out, because they've got a lot of worthwhile stuff on there.